I arrived at my New York apartment with a hopeful heart, longing to slip back into the quiet comfort of the life I'd built over the years. The familiar creak of the old wooden door should have welcomed me home, but instead it felt like a warning. As I stepped inside, the silence was deafening, and the place smelled faintly of strangers. My gaze swept across the room that had been mine for decades, but now it was unrecognizable. My belongings were gone. The bed where I had rested after long days was stripped bare. The dresser I had polished every week was empty, and the walls that once held my photographs and memories were stark and bare. A knot tightened in my chest as I noticed the door to my room was slightly ajar, revealing a suitcase and a few pieces of luggage that weren't mine. My heart pounded with confusion and dread. How could this be? Who had taken my things? I followed the faint sound of voices to the living room, where I overheard a conversation that chilled me to my core. My daughter-in-law was on the phone, her voice casual and indifferent as she explained to someone, "Yes, the room is available now. It's just been emptied out. The rent's reasonable, and it's ready to move in." I froze, the words echoing in my mind like a cruel joke. The room I had called my own was now being rented out, without a word to me. My daughter-in-law, who I had trusted to care for my son and respect our family, was leasing my space behind my back. I wanted to scream, to demand some explanation, but the weight of betrayal held me silent. She hung up and turned toward me, her smile as cold as the winter wind outside. "Oh, you're finally back," she said, her tone light, as if this were no big deal. "We had to make some arrangements while you were away. You understand, right? It's just temporary." Her eyes avoided mine, but the dismissiveness in her voice cut deeper than any knife. My mind raced, trying to grasp what I was hearing. "Temporary? Without telling me? You rented my room." The words were barely a whisper, disbelief coloring every syllable. She shrugged, as if the matter were trivial. "Your son and I talked it over. We thought it was the best way to help out with the bills. You've been away so long, and this place was just sitting empty." Her eyes flicked to the door, as if ready to close it on me and this conversation. I felt a wave of shock and heartbreak wash over me. This was my home, the place where I had raised my son, where his laughter had once filled the air, where I had hoped to grow old surrounded by the familiar. Now it felt like a stranger's territory, one where I was no longer welcome or even considered. The warmth and security I had associated with this apartment shattered in an instant. I clung to the memory of the cozy evenings spent knitting by the window, the aroma of fresh coffee in the mornings, and the laughter shared during holiday dinners. All of it now tainted by the cold reality that I had been erased from my own space. I managed to find my voice again, trembling but resolute. "I don't understand why I wasn't told. Why would you do this without even asking me?" Her expression hardened, the casual facade slipping away to reveal a new edge. "Look, it's complicated. You're not exactly here, and the rent helps keep everything afloat. You need to figure out where you're going to stay now." I stared at her, disbelief giving way to a profound sense of rejection. "You mean I have to find somewhere else? Right away?" She nodded, her mouth tightening into a thin line. "Yes, I'm sorry, but it has to be done. I'm sure you'll understand." The cold dismissal was like ice in my veins. The daughter-in-law I had once welcomed into our family was now the architect of my displacement. Her lack of remorse, the ease with which she cast me aside, broke something deep inside me. I thought of my son, wondering where he stood in all of this. Would he support me or simply let me be pushed aside? The silence in the room seemed to answer my unspoken question. He was nowhere to be found, neither voice nor presence to offer a shield. As I gathered what little remained of my belongings, the walls seemed to close in around me. The place I had called home now felt like a prison where I had been locked out rather than in. The weight of betrayal was suffocating, and yet, beneath the despair, a flicker of determination began to kindle. I refused to be cast aside without a fight. This was my life, my history, and my dignity. Though the path ahead was uncertain, I would find a way to reclaim my space and my voice. But for now, I had to face the painful truth. The person I had trusted most had turned against me, and my sanctuary was no longer safe. The evening light dimmed through the window as I sat alone amidst the emptiness. The apartment was no longer a home, but a hollow reminder of what had been lost. I clung to the hope that this nightmare was a misunderstanding, a temporary storm that would pass. Yet deep down, I knew the road ahead would be fraught with hardship and heartache. The betrayal was real, and the fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine was only just beginning. As I sat in the dim light of what used to be my living room, memories tumbled over one another like a storm inside my mind. I thought back to the years I had spent building this life in New York, each brick laid with hope, each wall painted with love. The laughter of my son echoing through the halls, the quiet evenings spent reading by the window, the warmth of family gatherings that once filled every corner. Those moments felt distant now, almost like they belonged to someone else. I remembered the subtle changes, the quiet shifts that had gone unnoticed until they became impossible to ignore. The way my daughter-in-law had started to exclude me from family decisions, how her visits became less frequent and more curt. At first I chalked it up to stress, to the challenges of raising a family. But now I saw the truth. She was carving out her own space, slowly pushing me aside, eroding the bond one thought we shared. Her disregard wasn't sudden. It was a slow erosion of trust. The casual remarks about making room and helping with expenses now seemed like deliberate steps in a plan I hadn't been invited to. I realized how little control I had over the life I had nurtured, and the sting of that realization fueled a fire within me. I would not be cast aside so easily. Determined to reclaim my dignity and my home, I began to think carefully about my next steps. I knew I couldn't confront her without preparation. I needed allies, information, and a plan. I reached out in my thoughts to the community center nearby, a place I had once visited for social gatherings and classes. It was a haven for people like me, offering support and resources for those navigating difficult times. I decided I would return there, find the networks and advice I so desperately needed. Gathering important documents became my immediate priority. I sifted through papers, rental agreements, utility bills, mail addressed to me. All proof that this was my home, my space. I found bank statements and phone records, hoping they could shed light on any communications about the unauthorized rental. I kept everything hidden, wary of raising suspicion. My daughter-in-law moved freely, making calls and arrangements without a care, unaware that I was quietly building a case. Meanwhile, the tension in the household grew palpable. She was busy making phone calls, arranging payments, coordinating with tenants, as if my presence was a mere inconvenience to be worked around. I noticed how the son remained silent, caught in the middle, unwilling or unable to intervene. His eyes avoided mine when I tried to speak with him, and his silence spoke volumes. Loyalty to his wife seemed to outweigh the bond with his mother, and I felt the sting of abandonment. Each day I watched from the sidelines as my world shifted beneath my feet, but I refused to be a passive spectator. I kept notes, recorded dates and conversations where I could, and documented every detail I could gather. The evidence was my shield, and I clung to it tightly. The community center became my refuge. I met people who had faced similar betrayals, who understood the pain of being sidelined in one's own home. They offered advice, legal contacts, and moral support. In those rooms filled with chatter and shared stories, I found strength I hadn't known I still possessed. They reminded me that I was not alone, that my voice mattered, and that there were ways to fight back. Back at the apartment, the daughter-in-law's attitude remained dismissive. She continued with her plans as if I were invisible, as if the woman whose room she rented out was some distant ghost. But I was not invisible. I was watching, collecting, preparing. The son's silence weighed heavily on me. He seemed trapped between two worlds, his wife's ambitions and his mother's pain. I longed for him to step forward, to stand with me, but his hesitation only deepened my resolve. If he would not speak, I would speak for myself. In quiet moments, I allowed myself to grieve what was being lost. The sense of home, the family I thought I had, the security of knowing where I belonged. But grief quickly gave way to clarity. This was a battle for my life's work, for my dignity, and I would not surrender without a fight. I began to sketch out a plan piece by piece. First, I would confront the daughter-in-law with the facts, calmly, firmly, armed with the documents and evidence I had gathered. I would make it clear that what she had done was unacceptable, that renting out my room without my consent was a violation of trust and rights. I would seek mediation, legal advice, and community support to hold her accountable. At the same time, I reached out to neighbors discreetly, sharing my story in hushed tones, seeking their understanding and support. Some nodded with sympathy, others offered advice, but all recognized the quiet injustice unfolding behind closed doors. Their solidarity became another thread in the safety net I was weaving around myself. I found a quiet resolve growing inside me, a determination to reclaim not just my physical space but my place in the family and community. I realized that this was more than a fight over a room. It was a fight for respect, for recognition, and for the dignity that comes with being seen and heard. The daughter-in-law's plans moved forward, unaware that each step she took was being watched, recorded, and challenged. She thought she could erase me with a few phone calls and contracts, but I was quietly gathering the truth. I was preparing to shine a light on the betrayal that threatened to consume me. As the days passed, I balanced the pain of rejection with the strength of purpose. I was no longer the passive victim. I was a woman ready to stand tall, to fight for the life she had built. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but I was no longer afraid. In the quiet of my empty room, I whispered to myself a promise. I would not be forgotten. I would not be pushed aside. I would reclaim what was mine. Not just the space, but the respect and love that should never have been taken from me. And so, with a heart both heavy and hopeful, I prepared for the confrontation that would follow. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to step into the fight, armed with truth, supported by community, and fueled by the unyielding strength of a mother's love. The day I finally confronted my daughter-in-law arrived like a storm I had been bracing for, both inevitable and overwhelming. I found myself standing at the threshold of the apartment, clutching the folder that held all the documents, phone records, and notes I had painstakingly gathered. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment, the gravity of standing up to someone I had once welcomed into my family. She looked up from the kitchen counter where she was sorting through bills, her expression cool and unreadable. "You wanted to talk?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. I took a deep breath and met her gaze. "Yes, I need to understand why you rented out my room without my permission." Her eyes flickered with annoyance, as if my question was an inconvenience. "I thought I explained before. We needed the extra income and you weren't here. It seemed like the logical thing to do." "The logical thing to do was to talk to me first," I said firmly, sliding the folder onto the table. "I've been gathering evidence, phone calls, messages, rental agreements. This wasn't a simple mistake. You deliberately excluded me." She crossed her arms and leaned back against the counter, her defenses rising. "Look, I'm just trying to keep this household afloat. You don't understand how hard it is." "I understand more than you think," I replied, voice steady despite the hurt simmering beneath. "But this isn't just about money. It's about respect. You disregarded me, my rights, and our family bond. That's why I recorded our previous conversations and saved those messages. I need you to know I'm serious." Her face hardened. "Do you have to be like this? I'm doing what's best for everyone." "Is it best for me?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Because from where I stand it feels like I've been pushed out. The room felt charged with tension, the air thick with unspoken grievances and years of unaddressed pain. I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes, quickly masked by defensiveness. She refused to meet my gaze directly now, instead fiddling with a pen on the counter. I continued, "I'm not here to fight, but I need you to stop renting out my room. We have to find a way to fix this, together or otherwise." She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But it won't be easy." I sensed the wall she had built around herself, and I knew this was only the beginning. I would need more than words to resolve this. I would need support, proof, and a plan. Over the following days I discreetly recorded our conversations, capturing every excuse, every defensive reply. I saved text messages where she brushed off my concerns or threatened to continue renting out the room regardless. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the foundation of my case, a shield against the injustice I faced. The tension in the apartment escalated. She grew more defensive, her voice sharper when we spoke. I noticed how she avoided discussing the issue with my son, who remained silent, unwilling to take sides. His absence from the conflict felt like a betrayal of its own. Neighbors began to notice the strain, offering sympathetic glances and quiet words of encouragement when I crossed paths with them. I shared my story with a few trusted friends, careful to protect my privacy but eager to build a network of support. Despite the hostile environment, I found strength in my resolve. Each recorded conversation was a reminder that I was not powerless. I was gathering the truth and with it the power to protect myself. One afternoon, as I sat in the small community room at the center, I reviewed the recordings and messages again. The daughter-in-law's tone was dismissive, her words laced with entitlement. "It's just a room," she had said in one message. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." But to me it was everything. It was my home, my sanctuary, my history. And she had treated it like a commodity, unaware or uncaring of the hurt she caused. I prepared to take this evidence to a family meeting, hoping to bring the truth into the open, to force a reckoning that could no longer be avoided. I practiced what I would say, striving to remain calm but firm, to speak not just from anger but from a place of dignity. When the day came, I gathered my documents and recordings, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. I was ready to confront not only my daughter-in-law but also my son and the rest of the family. They needed to understand what had happened, to see the pain and betrayal that had been hidden behind closed doors. As I entered the room where they waited, I felt a surge of clarity. This was my moment, not just to reclaim my room, but to reclaim my voice, my place in the family, and my sense of self-worth. I would not be silenced or sidelined any longer. The air in the room was thick with tension as I stood before my family, the folder of evidence clutched tightly in my hands. The faces surrounding me were a mixture of confusion, defensiveness, and in some cases, thinly veiled frustration. My daughter-in-law sat with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed, while my son avoided meeting my gaze, his silence heavy with unspoken words. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I want to explain what's been happening while I was away," I began, my voice firm but calm. "My room was rented out without my knowledge or consent. I have recordings, messages, and documents that prove this." I opened the folder and began to play one of the recordings on my phone. The conversation between my daughter-in-law and a prospective tenant filled the room, her voice casual as she discussed rent and terms. I saw the shock flicker across several faces, including my son's, who finally looked up, his expression troubled. "This isn't just about money," I continued. "It's about respect and trust. The fact that this was done without any discussion with me is a betrayal. I've been pushed out of my own home." My daughter-in-law's defenses cracked. "I was trying to help," she said, voice shaky now. "The bills are high, and I thought it was the best solution." "But you didn't think to include me?" I asked quietly. "You didn't consider how this would affect me?" She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. The room grew silent, the weight of the evidence pressing heavily on us all. My son finally spoke, his voice low and conflicted. "I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to choose sides." "You had a choice," I said. "And you chose silence." That hurt more than anything. The conversation was raw and painful but necessary. Family members who had been distant or uninvolved began to voice their shock and disappointment. They asked questions, seeking to understand how this situation had unfolded under their noses. With the support of the family, we agreed to bring the matter before a tenant rights group and legal advisors. The goal was clear: to mediate, to find a fair resolution, and to ensure that what happened to me wouldn't happen again. The daughter-in-law was compelled to cease renting out the room immediately and to provide compensation for the hardship caused. It was a small victory but a crucial one. The acknowledgement of wrongdoing and the steps taken to rectify it felt like the first rays of light after a long, dark night. I reclaimed my rightful space in the apartment, the walls once again echoing with my presence. More importantly, I regained a measure of respect within the family and community. The ordeal had exposed fractures, but it also opened the door to healing. As I settled back into my room, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, but it was tempered by the strength I had found in standing up for myself. I realized that silence only enables deception, and that speaking out, even when it's difficult, can lead to justice. I felt a resolve growing within me, not just to protect my own rights, but to help others who might face similar challenges. The experience had taught me the importance of vigilance, of documenting and sharing the truth. It was a lesson I intended to pass on. Though the wounds were not yet fully healed, and the road ahead remained uncertain, I knew I was no longer alone or powerless. The fight had brought me clarity, and with that clarity came hope. The family was shaken, but the bonds that remained were stronger for having faced the truth. In the quiet moments that followed, I understood that justice was not just about reclaiming a room. It was about reclaiming dignity, respect, and the right to be heard. I had taken the first step, and I was ready to continue walking the path toward healing and restoration. The days that followed the family meeting were filled with quiet reflection and a growing sense of purpose. I sat in my reclaimed room, the familiar walls surrounding me once more, and I thought about the ordeal I had endured, not just the betrayal, but the fight to be heard and respected. The pain still lingered beneath the surface, but it was tempered by the unshakable strength I had discovered within myself. I realized that this experience had changed me. I was no longer the silent, sidelined woman who had been pushed out of her own home. I had become an advocate for myself, and I knew I could be an advocate for others. The injustice I had faced was not unique, and I felt a responsibility to help those who might walk the same painful path. With that resolve kindling inside me, I began to reach out. I returned to the community center, the place that had offered me solace and support during my darkest moments, and shared my story openly. I started teaching classes on elder rights, focusing on how to protect one's living space and dignity when faced with family disputes and betrayal. I spoke candidly about the importance of vigilance, of documenting conversations, and of seeking help before situations spiraled out of control. The response was overwhelming. Older women, many of whom had suffered in silence, came forward to learn and share their own stories. We formed a network of support, a community bound by shared experience and determination. In those gatherings I found joy and purpose, a new chapter unfolding in the aftermath of pain. I kept my cameras and recording devices hidden, not out of fear, but as a constant reminder of the vigilance that life now required. They symbolized the lessons learned, that silence can be a tool when used wisely, capturing lies and exposing truth. I encouraged others to use similar methods, not to sow discord, but to protect themselves and claim their rightful voices. In time, my story caught the attention of local media, and I found myself dubbed the New York mother who reclaimed her home. The spotlight was unexpected, but I embraced it as an opportunity to raise awareness about elder rights and the hidden struggles many face within their own families. Through interviews and public speaking engagements, I shared the message that strength does not come from revenge but from resilience, the ability to stand tall, to be heard, and to reclaim dignity. I urged others to speak out, to seek help, and to remember that age does not diminish one's worth or power. Looking back, I understood that the true victory was not just regaining my room, or even the respect of my family. It was reclaiming my narrative, refusing to be erased or silenced, and turning a painful chapter into a beacon of hope for others. My journey became a testament to the importance of courage and community. I learned that betrayal, while devastating, can be a catalyst for growth and change. The wounds remained, but they were woven into a tapestry of resilience and empowerment. As I continued to teach and advocate, I remained vigilant but hopeful. I knew that many would still face the challenges I had overcome, but I also knew that they could find strength in my story and in the community we had built together. In the quiet moments of reflection, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had turned my pain into purpose, my silence into a voice that could not be ignored, and that voice would continue to speak, for myself and for all those who deserve to be seen, heard, and respected in the homes they call their own.